Hello everyone, a very good morning. So today let's talk about a very short, quick video about the principles of extraction. Okay, so we all know that there are three principles of extraction: wedge, lever, and wheel and axial principle. Okay, so I'll be telling about what is these principles and how you are going to extract it. Okay, so first one will be the wedge principle. So what do you mean by wedge principle? So wedge principle is like a triangular instrument which is in the form of elevators, whatever it may be, straight elevator or periosteal elevator. Okay, so this elevator, because it is triangle, okay, this portion is engaged to the tooth and the bone. I'm engaging the sharp structure between the tooth and the bone. Okay, so let us imagine that this is a tooth. Okay, and then we have the alveolar bone, and what happens, I am inserting the instrument here. So the sides of the instrument, that is these areas, they are going to transmit the force to the bone and to the tooth. So this is bone, this is the root. Okay, so when I am giving or placing the instrument between the root and the tooth, and it is going to exert pressure to the root and the bone. How? That is exerted by the downward or apical pressure by the instrument. Okay, so this principle is based on the downward or apical pressure. Okay, I'm placing the elevator and I'm giving apical pressure towards the root. So when giving apical pressure towards the root, what happens, the slopes of the instrument, they exert pressure to the root and the bone. And what the bone will do, we all know that bone has two parts or three parts, whatever you call, outer cortical plate, inner cortical plate, or outer and inner cortical plates, and a spongy bone, right? So the spongy bone, okay, which is present between the outer and the inner cortical plates, what it will do is, because of the excess force given by me during the apical pressure, it will try to compress itself. Okay, I'm feeling more amount of pressure, don't give me pressure, it will compress, it will move back. So it is going to hit the outer cortical plate. So what does the outer cortical plate will do? It will try to bend or it will try to move, okay, without fracture. So in that way the bone expands. So there is going to be elastic deformation. Okay, so how the elastic deformation takes place? I'm placing an instrument between the root and the tooth and I'm giving apical pressure. This apical pressure is exerted to the roots and the bone by the slopes of the instrument. Because the bone receives more amount of pressure, the spongy bone compresses and tells that I cannot receive more amount of pressure. So what happens, the outer cortical plates, it tries to move away from the pressure. That is what we call it as deformation. The expansion of the bone takes place, right? So because of this expansion and also during the apical pressure, I'm tearing out the PDL ligament, the tooth pops out. Okay, this is the most easiest way. So wedge principle is basically based on the principle of apical pressure. Downward pressure causes the expansion of the bone or elastic deformation of the bone, and it causes the tearing of the PDL, so the tooth pops out. So young people will have more flexible bone. So that is why the young patients, you can easily remove the tooth, but in older patients they are more prone for fractures. Okay, so this is wedge principle. So wedge principle is based on the apical pressure. So the next principle will be lever principle. So what do you mean by lever principle is, see, we all would have played in this, right? So one people will sit here, another person will sit here, we used to play. So imagine this is the fulcrum. Fulcrum is the point which I'm using it to move. Okay, so a seesaw moves around the fulcrum. If this fulcrum is not there, it will sit, it is going to fall down, right? So fulcrum is very important. Now imagine a tooth. Okay, and this is the bone. Okay, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to place the instrument Okay, I'm going to place the instrument between the tooth and the bone. Okay, similar to wedge principle, I'm placing the instrument elevators between the root and the bone. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to use the bone as a fulcrum. What does that mean? I will rest the elevator on the fulcrum. So I'm going to rest this elevator or push down this elevator over the bone, and then I'm going to give pressure. Okay, so I'm using the bone as a fulcrum. Okay, and this is the load. So this is the one that I should remove it out. So what I'm going to do, I'm placing an elevator between the tooth root and the bone. Okay, and this elevator, if it is long, if the handle of the elevator is long, then less pressure is needed. If the handle of the instrument is short, then more pressure is needed. So imagine I'm holding the instrument, I'm holding the instrument here, okay? So I'm trying to give pressure, or I'm trying to hold the instrument towards the bone and I'm trying to give pressure. So outer I'll give less pressure, but because it is the bone is used as a fulcrum, more amount of pressure will be generated inside of the instrument that will pop the tooth out. So lever principle is basically very simple. It's very similar to which instead of apical pressure, I'm resting the elevator on the bone. I'm using the bone as a fulcrum, and then I'm trying to lift the tooth. Okay, this is the lever principle. Okay, now moving on to the next principle, that is wheel and axle principle. So wheel and axle principle, if you see, I'm not using bone as a fulcrum here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to place the instrument between the tooth and the bone. Okay, between the tooth and the bone. And then what I'll do is, I will try to get a point of grip. Okay, so once the grip point is obtained, that is once the resistance is felt by the elevator after placing the elevator between the root and the bone, once I feel the resistance, I will start to rotate the handle of the instrument. I'll remove the tooth by rotating. So in that way, I'm not using bone as a fulcrum, because when I use bone as a fulcrum, you cannot rotate the instrument, right? Because the bone is eating here. So see, in this image, you see the bone, the instrument is rested over the bone. I cannot rotate the instrument. I can just give some movement. That's all. But in wheel and axle principle, I'm just placing the instrument between the root and the bone. I'm not giving any support to the bone. I'm just, after getting a grip or a resistance against the root, I'm rotating the instrument so the tooth pops out. So this is about the wheel and axle principle. Okay, so these forms the very three basics of principles of extraction. One is wedge principle, where I am placing the instrument between the root and the tooth, giving apical pressure. Because of the elastic deformation, the bone compress and there's going to be popping out of the tooth. The next one will be lever principle, where I'm using the bone as a fulcrum. I'll rest the instrument on the bone and I'll give movements so the tooth pops out. And then the last one will be wheel and axle principle, placing the instrument between the root and the tooth, and I will rotate the instrument and not using bone as fulcrum. I'm just rotating the instrument and I'm removing the tooth. So this is about the basics of principle. I hope this video makes sense. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.